This is Harry Watt of North Carolina State University Wood Products Extension. This is the 2021 National Firewood Workshop, and I have the pleasure today to be talking about wood stoves and burning and clean burning with John Ackerly of the Alliance for Green Heat. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Harry. Thanks for inviting me again. I've enjoyed talking at these almost every year.
Yeah, we appreciate this. Now, next year we plan to be in Wisconsin, so you'll have to come up and be with us there.
All right.
Talking about wood stoves, we see this as the demand side. It's one thing to split a lot of wood, but it needs to go with somebody that wants to pay us for it. So if we can have cleaner stoves, is that going to help us sell more wood?
Well, I think it'll help sell more wood if our society in general looks at wood as a good thing to use for heating. So we're kind of at a point where, a lot of people use wood, which is good. But more and more people are looking at it as a source of pollution. So I think we are at a point where we have to pay more attention to how people perceive us and how the firewood industry can improve its practices and make sure it's not contributing to more pollution. So I guess by that, I mean, I really would urge folks, you guys know your business better than anyone, but I would love to see firewood dealers disclosing their moisture content, showing the consumer, like when they deliver it, whatever it is, hopefully it's close to 20%. But, we really need to educate folks about the importance of dry firewood. So that's, I guess, the first point I want to make.
Well, one thing we have, America, it still is growing in population, and there's been the trend over the last 100 years to move into suburbs and cities, and supposedly half the population or more is in close areas. So, if we have a 100 household development and everybody's burning wood, if it burns clean, that's okay. But if it's not clean, we're all in trouble.
Yeah. And I think the folks in the suburban areas don't necessarily have much of a history with firewood. And they're the ones who often, even though they may be well-meaning, they get their firewood late, they don't get it covered soon enough. And that's a problem. When I go up to New Hampshire, where I grew up, everyone has their firewood stored and split well in advance. It's beautiful to see driving around. You see these beautiful piles under a shed or on the front porch or in a barn. But that's not happening in a lot of the country. So, when you deliver in the suburbs also, you can charge a bit of a premium. A lot of folks in the suburbs have a little extra money. And I think they care about, they may want nicer wood delivered. But I think it's also good to tell people where the wood is from, because a lot of people in the suburbs now, they worry that it's not sustainable. They think cutting down trees is bad. And I think we have a story to tell, which is, a lot of firewood is already from a dead tree. It's repurposed. It may have been taken down by a tree trimmer, or it's from, an area that the firewood dealer has been using for years, and it's, a very sustainable source. But a lot of folks just don't believe that. So I think there's some stories we need to tell, and I think it would really help if there was an effective firewood association that could start telling those stories and developing, some talking points and materials for firewood dealers, because it's, as I really want wood and pellets to be a major source of energy to replace fossil fuels. But there's a lot of uneducated people out there that think we're deforesting the country, which is simply not true. But it is true that there is often a smoke problem.
Right. Well, what technologies can we use to make our stick stoves burn cleaner and not have a smoke problem?
Well, stoves are getting cleaner every year. The new regulations out, the new stoves that you buy, those stoves can burn dry wood without any visible smoke, as long as the operator has some basic common sense and gives it air. But again, it come back to this, whether you have an ancient stove or a brand new stove, not only the moisture content, but the size. So Harry, you were telling me about, delivering a certain size. So if a customer says they want 3 and 4 inch splits, that's actually a great size to burn, because one of the biggest problems is people that try to burn 5, 6, even 7 inch splits, in diameter. And that wood, in fact, I grew up, my dad taught me how to use, he says, oh, you always want to get that big old niter log, and it doesn't need to be dry. You want it to be still warm in the morning. But, that was conditions for a major smoldering fire. And I think a lot of us need to unlearn what our parents may have taught us and learn to the importance of smaller dry pieces of wood that'll burn really well. You get the most BTUs out of them.
Well, my daddy he had that philosophy, and I would tell him that, Pop, if you want it, he liked to burn wood wetter than I did. Okay. So I would tell him, I'll put a bucket of water next to the stove. If you want to dunk it before you put it in, that'd be all right.
Yeah. My dad could never kind of get rid of that mindset. He'd put all sorts of things in his stove too. I'd find like old picture frames that had been painted that was ready to go in for kindling. And I said, Dad, you just can't do that. It's not good for the stove. It's not good for your stovepipe, to have those chemicals, and it's not good for anyone to breathe. Even though he was way out in the middle of nowhere, it's not as if people were breathing it, but it can come back in your own house too.
Well, are there any adaptations we can do with our existing stoves? I do understand if you buy a new stove, you're getting much cleaner burning, but is there anything we can do to existing stoves to make them more efficient?
Very little. Of course, one thing you really want to do is you want to clean them. Again, a lot of folks, in rural areas have been burning wood a long time. They know the importance of that. They clean their own. But folks in the suburbs, they are people who are just starting. They often don't want to clean the stove. They have to get a professional, which is not cheap, but it's really important to do that. But there are not many adaptations. There's some real modern technology like an ESP, an electrostatic precipitator, which are being used in Europe a lot. And what it does, it's the same technology you put on a massive power plant, but they're now coming down smaller sizes, cost $500, and you put them on your stovepipe, and it sucks the air through it, and there's electrical charge that takes the particles out. So there are some high-tech solutions. They're starting to use those up in Fairbanks, places where they have serious air pollution problems. And, we may start seeing those more and more over the next 5-10 years.
Well, as long as people see the smoke as a problem, we'll be working on it, and perhaps we can get better. So as far as moisture content, where do you think we need to start burning our stick wood? When do we declare something as seasoned? That's one of the big debates in the industry. What does seasoned mean?
Well, I always use 20%. But like I say, it all depends when you deliver that wood to the person, and whether they, so if you're delivering it, the later in the season you deliver it, the drier it needs to be. And that's a real problem, because often that's the later in the season you go, sometimes your wood may not be near 20%. So, one thing I think is a great business strategy is to get people to pay up front for like 2 cords and get them, you have to make fewer deliveries, try to get them to buy more than they need so that they have wood left over to start the next season with. And even require that, in some areas, it's hard to find people that deliver firewood. So, you may have some leverage to say, yeah, I'll deliver you firewood, but you have to buy whatever, 2, 3, even 4 cords of wood. And I'll get my son to build you a firewood shed. You can spin off a little firewood shed business to help people get their wood stored properly if they're not doing that already.
Well, that's a good idea, because when you deliver firewood, they have to have some place to put it. If they don't, they need, if they buy small quantities out, they could buy a rack from the firewood delivery person. And if they've got a bigger quantity, they could use a shed.
Yeah.
So is there any new ideas about how to build fires?
Well, yeah, actually, there's some old ideas. Top-down fires are really the way to go. Again, it's acknowledged that people used to know and got lost in the mix. But if you put your biggest pieces on the bottom and your very smallest pieces on the top, that'll be a much cleaner startup, because you're not trying to heat up those big pieces of wood too quickly. As the fire burns down, that wood will combust when it's ready to combust. So, but the other thing is just using tons of kindling. I live in a suburban area, and people ask me who to buy firewood from. So I try to give them some leads, but I said, the best firewood is all these dumpsters. Any house that's doing a renovation, they throw away tons of 2x4s. And 2x4s are like the best way to get good kindling. It's free, and it's super dry, and it's super easy to split. So I always urge folks just to use tons of kindling to get their fire started.
Okay. Well, we are finding more and more ways to burn wood. I visited retail stores, and there's a huge selection of stoves, but also people have outdoor and other things. So what do you think of all the ways that we can burn wood now?
I think they're all good options. I mean, any new equipment you buy, whether it's outdoor boiler, indoor boiler, masonry heater, cat stove, non-cat stove, now they're hybrids. The hybrids we think are the best. It has both secondary combustion, air tubes, plus it has a cat. So actually, we never encourage people to go with a cat only. If you're going to get a cat stove, make sure it's also a hybrid. And there are lots of those on the market. And the reason is it's an easier way for the stove companies to hit the stricter EPA regulations, which are down to 2 grams an hour now. But of course, folks are also using a lot of backyard fire pits. And that's another place where we need people to have dry wood, because, for instance, in my neighborhood, we get much more air pollution from fire pits than we do from wood stoves. And it's another reason maybe you can sell a little more wood to folks, further ahead of time, is because now folks also need it in the summer. They need it year round to in their backyard kitchen. There's all these fancy backyard patios coming up with all this fancy stuff, which is helping the firewood dealers stay alive, because they're selling all sorts of things for the patio now. But this diversification is really important for the whole industry.
Well, here in North Carolina, we have a gentleman that runs a firewood business, and I thought he was brilliant when I visited him, and he was telling me that he collects wood from people that are developing lots and arborists. So he doesn't buy firewood, they come and drop it. And he figured out if he would take anything they wanted to get rid of, that they would be more likely to bring it. So when they started bringing pine, he had to figure out what to do with it. So he figured out that maybe that would be his go-to wood for outdoor fire pits. So he made a big pile of it. When people came in, he would give them a sample, and they found out that it starts easier and it goes out easier, because people don't want to spend all night at a fire pit.
That's right. Yeah.
So
yeah, that's a great idea.
It is a good idea, and he's, as far as I know, he's the only guy I've crossed paths with that does that. So if we can just keep thinking of better and better, maybe we'll figure more and more out.
Yeah.
What about regulations coming down the pike? Have you got some insight into those?
Well, I have a lot of insight into regulations about stoves. There will be another NSPS, which is the regulations they do on EPA does for wood stoves. And one thing they're gonna start testing stoves with cordwood more. In the past they tested stoves with cribwood, which is 2x4s and 4x4s. So there is a change coming over the industry about how stoves are tested, and it's also incredibly controversial. There's going to be lawsuits probably, and some states are trying to dominate the process. And but anyway, I don't see regulations coming down the pike on firewood per se. I don't know so much about, there's all the invasive species and the rules about where you can transport wood, how far, and over which border. And that's not my specialty, so I'm not going to try to talk about that. But in terms of, you do see, like in Alaska, there are regulations about moisture content, and you are not allowed to deliver wood that's above like 25%. And we could see more of that, but I think that's going to be very local. I don't think we'll see anything like that at the state level. But I would also really encourage manufacturers, like in a state, even, just set up the Vermont Firewood Association just as a starting point. You don't need, and start, getting some organization, get people talking to each other, and have someone who can be a spokesperson for the media whenever they want to talk to someone about firewood. Or, I really think the industry needs some more representation. And there was this Firewood Association of America, but it really wasn't, it didn't hit the spot. It wasn't a genuine association that was made up of core firewood dealers. So I think that's now closed down or pretty close to it. So now it's really an opportunity for you guys to come up and start one again, maybe using the same name. I don't know if they'd let you use that. And because as moving forward, I think, there is going to be more focus on smoke. And a lot of communities, the national ambient air quality standards are coming down. And as more automobiles turn to electric, like 10 years from now, wood smoke may be the primary pollutant in the air. It used to be automobiles, and I mean, it still is, and trucks in a lot of areas, but we are going to come under more scrutiny as the transportation sector gets electrified. And a lot of heating systems are getting electrified. There's a big push for heat pumps. So we may kind of stand out more like a sore thumb in the future, which is why, I think we need to organize, we need to get an industry association on top of this, and start, having some voluntary rules, which I think can help people's business too, because everyone wants to deal with a reputable firewood dealer. And if you can have some logo or something that identifies you as, a professional operation that delivers what it claims to deliver, will just be a good thing for a lot of the bigger firewood retailers.
All right. Well, John, we appreciate you being with us today and talking about wood stoves, because that's going to be a driving force. We have a long history in America of burning wood, fireplaces, wood stoves inside the house, outside the house, fire pits, cooking wood. So yeah, this is very important for the country, and I hope we pursue a path that's going to help us all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks, Harry. And I look forward to seeing all the other presentations in a few days.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.